Finding the right person for the job isn't easy. Just ask someone who hired a monster truck driver to deliver pizza.
And the neighbors are going wild. You can hear that engine from a mile away, Fran.
And he's foregoing the driveway and heading right up the lawn and over the azaleas. What a power move.
But if you've got an insurance question, you can always count on your local Geico agent. They can bundle your policies, which could save you hundreds.
With 6-foot tires and a roll cage, this pizza guy can quite literally crush the competition.
For expert help with all your insurance needs, visit geico.com/local today.
Introducing Under Armour's Infinity High Sports Bra. Its ergonomic design is molded to support the natural movement of your body. With cord-out padding, the better breathability eliminates extra bulk without sacrificing support. And quick-dry padding is Under Armour's fastest-drying padding yet. When you're lifting heavy, running fast, and pushing yourself further than ever before, you need a bra that will help you go that extra mile and make you feel your best. Shop the Infinity High Sports Bra now at UA.com.
Welcome to the Boneyard with Steve Robertson. As always, I am your good friend and host, Steve Robertson, here on the Maroon Friday edition of the Yard, a much later edition of the show. We had football camp today. We've got one more football camp to go for the month of June, and that's tomorrow, a 7-on-7 camp. That'll be on Saturday, and that'll wrap things up for the month of June. There'll be one more summer camp, and that'll be the 29th of July. That'll be another top dog camp. Probably won't have quite as many campers on that day. We had 517 today at last count. One of the biggest camps I've ever seen on a Mississippi State campus. And so with that many guys, sometimes it's tough to kind of make heads or tails of things. We will have kind of a review of some of the known commodities, guys that have Mississippi State offers that were there today. So that's something to look forward to. And then, of course, we'll talk about some Mississippi State college baseball portal news today as well. College World Series gets underway today. Last I saw, Oklahoma was throttling Texas A&M. And then, of course, the evening game will be interesting, too. Notre Dame taking on – who are they taking on? Texas. Won't that be fun? And then tomorrow, an interesting day, too. I know most of you are probably kind of waiting to see tomorrow's games. Arkansas versus Stanford, that's your afternoon matinee. And then Ole Miss versus Auburn there in the nightcap. And so a lot of SEC action. 3 out of 4 teams on tomorrow will be from our conference. And how interesting that 4 teams from the SEC West make it to Omaha. One of the things that John Cohen used to tell me years ago when there were only 8 teams going to Hoover, he goes, if we can make it to Hoover, we can make it to Omaha. And I didn't always fully appreciate that. Now that I'm a little bit older and a little more maybe in tune with what John's talking about, if you can win in the SEC, you can win nationally. It's the best baseball conference in America. And I go back to about this whole Ole Miss thing getting in. There are a lot of people say, hey, NC State should have been in over Ole Miss, and I think you could make that argument. I think the bigger thing is, and I've talked about this with some friends as of late, is Grand Canyon getting in. Grand Canyon. And the SEC being the best baseball conference, we deserve to get 9 in. NC State would have been the 10th school for the ACC, and we'd have had 8 had they gotten in over Ole Miss. And so even though we don't like the fact that Ole Miss made it to Omaha, the reality of it is they've proven their worthiness in this tournament. And so, of course, I hope they lose and not score a run in either game. But the reality of it is they're there. We're not. So we're taking some steps to change that on the Mississippi State side to ensure that we get a much more challenging team next year in many respects. And, again, I think it's going to boil down to pitching. I think the lineup will be good. I think it's going to boil down to pitching. We've got to kind of commit some resources, shall we say, to ensure that we get the bullpen and starters that we need. We've got some guys coming in. We've got to find some other guys to kind of supplement that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. But enjoy the College World Series this weekend. I know it'll be a lot funner for us once we don't have the fear of Ole Miss winning one. And again, anything can happen in Omaha. Anything can happen in Omaha. I still like Stanford to win it. Let's thank our friends at Bulldog Burger Company. You may not know this, but this weekend, the new patio area is unveiled, kind of a grand opening of sorts. New patio area at Bulldog Burger Company here. Be sure and check that out. Go by and maybe have that nice little meal outside. You get a great restaurant quality hamburger inside or outside, but nice little area there to kind of sit and chill and have a drink. Adult or not. It's up to you. 3 great locations to serve you. University Drive here in Star Vegas, Gloucester Street there in Tupelo, and the newest one, Lake Harbor Drive there in the Ridgeland, Flowwood area. I love Bulldog Burger Company. I have loved them long before they were a sponsor of this show. Great people doing a great job at a great price. Have a great restaurant quality hamburger today at Bulldog Burger Company. And get spring rolls. Is your appetizer. They will make you better looking. How about that? Bulldog Burger Company, the place where people go to meet. M-E-A-T. All right, let's talk a little bit about the camp festivities today. As I mentioned, it's like 500 kids. And that's the thing, too. It's like you kind of lose track when there's that many guys. And I don't know how you can get quality reps for everybody. I mean, you may only get a handful of reps for each guy. It's tough. It's tough to manage that many people. It really is. I believe the biggest combine that we had when I was doing them was around 300. And we could get everybody registered and tested and back on the road by 2 o'clock. I mean, that was always our goal. Open up registration. We would say we're going to open at 8, but we actually would open earlier. And you get everybody their shirt, you get their picture taken, you get it, and the next thing you know, everybody's on the field and we're rolling. By 10 o'clock, we got everybody tested. And then we get to noon and we can do one-on-ones the rest of the day. And you knock out the OLDL stuff by 1 o'clock and those guys are finished, they can leave. But 300, it's around 300 that we had one day in Tupelo. And that's probably the biggest camp that I have personally facilitated. And that's with the help of volunteers. Of course, they've got a lot more staff here at Mississippi State, but it is very difficult to manage that many people and get a good evaluation of those prospects. Now, here's the thing, too. There's some guys, of course, that are invited for a workout, and there are other people that show up for a workout. And you've got a lot of guys there at camps today that are really not college football prospects. They're trying to learn something. They're trying to kind of hone their skill a little bit, kind of prepare for their season, hoping to pick up some tricks of the trade from an SEC coaching staff. So not everybody's motivation to camp is the same. There are some people camping for an offer, and sure, they would all love to have an offer from an SEC school like Mississippi State. But the reality of it is a lot of these guys are never going to play beyond the high school level. But you still want them to have a good experience. You still want them to come in and have a good experience and leave the Mississippi State campus with a very positive feeling. Because you never know when their cousin or when their brother or when their son or when their teammate is coming up the ranks and is a legitimate SEC prospect. And they'll say, hey, I remember when, my cousin Joe came over here and everybody treated him great. He didn't get an offer, but he had a great experience on the Mississippi State campus. And so that's what you always want. And more times than not, that's exactly what happens. I rarely ever see people complaining about football camps, at least not the kids. I mean, there's always some parents out there, little league parents, who are like, hey, they didn't even look at my kid. And, you want to say, hey, he's 5'7", 140 pounds. Can he hit the curveball? He's not going to be able to play SEC football. But the reality of it is it's a big day. Now, I want to share with you guys, too. I shared this story earlier. I won't mention the high school this guy was from. And it actually is an Ole Miss story. How about that? Very positive story, though. So years ago, we were able to do Scout.com combines on college campuses. And so we would do one at Mississippi State. The next year would be at Ole Miss. We'd do one at Alabama. The next year we'd be at Auburn. Well, after a couple of years, the NCAA outlawed that because other schools, within the conference and within your state felt like, hey, it's a competitive advantage for those schools. It's not fair that Southern Miss doesn't get the opportunity to have a Scout.com combine on their campus. It's not fair that UAB or Georgia Southern or Georgia State. It's not fair. And there's probably some truth in all that. Maybe it's not fair. It's like, hey, you have this big event on another school's campus, and all of a sudden the kids are going around taking pictures and having a chance to see the facilities and things like that. So it's basically a de facto unofficial visit that's just not supervised by the staff. Of course, none of the recruiting staff could be there. We couldn't have Mississippi State coaches facilitating the camp, couldn't have Ole Miss coaches facilitating the camp there. But we got it together. And I remember, when we were doing the one at Ole Miss, I was very involved with putting that list together. Very involved. And so there were a couple people that had North Mississippi. I had everything from Jackson south, from Jackson to the coast. And I called every single high school in the state of Mississippi. Had a list of all these coaches, and thankfully the Mississippi High School Coaches Association provided me with this great list. I could call the head coaches directly, and back in those days, some people had home phones and cell numbers, but I got everybody. I talked to every single coach, and a lot of them were like, hey, I don't have, I don't have a prospect this year, Steve, but thanks for calling. But most people felt like, hey, I've got somebody that can play beyond the high school level, perhaps as a junior college level, and we want those guys too. We don't just want, the potential four-star type guys. We didn't just want Fletcher Cox to come. We wanted his teammates to come too, provided they could play above the high school level. And so we're sending them to Ole Miss. And, of course, I was up there. And I remember there was one particular school, and I won't say who it is, because I don't want to embarrass the young man. Not a young man anymore. I mean, we're talking, it's probably happened, goodness, 15 years ago. But the reality of it is so I called his coach. He goes, hey, I've got a kid. He's kind of a marginal guy, may be able to play JUCO ball, but he's a great kid, and I'd like for him to be able to go. And I'm thinking, okay, number one, if this coach really wants his guy to go, I need to get him on the list. And if he has a realistic chance of playing beyond the high school level, we want him on that list. Because what if he goes to junior college and he grows a couple inches and gets bigger and stronger, and all of a sudden he becomes a bona fide D1 prospect? Well, we want to make sure we've got a profile page for him. We want to make sure that we've got good pictures of him and that we have a relationship with him. We have his phone number. So I invite the kid. And so I get there that day, and I go through the registration list, and I see all my guys that made it and the ones that didn't. So I'm going through, and I wanted to go and meet each of these young men. And so I go through, and I see this one guy, the one guy that was kind of a marginal prospect. And guys, when I laid eyes on him, I was like, this guy's not even a marginal prospect. He's lucky to be playing high school football. It's true. The truth of the matter is, at an elite camp like that, he really didn't have any business there. And it was a part of me, I felt a little bit embarrassed, because I was thinking, why would I I invited this kid, and everybody's going to see that this guy has no business being here. And I really made that more about me than I should have. And so after the camp was over, I took, over the course of the next couple of weeks, I called all these young men, or I called their coaches just to make sure everybody had a good time. Make sure that we had correct contact information for everybody. Just kind of following up. That's what you do. When you do things in a professional manner, that's how you handle things. And so I called this young guy's house, and his dad answered the phone. And he's like, hey, let me get him for you. And we start talking, and next thing I know, the guy he gets emotional, starts weeping a little bit. The dad, not the kid, the dad. And he goes, man, Steve, I just want to thank you for inviting him. He came home, he had the best time. He said this kid's been an Ole Miss fan his entire life. So all I ever wanted to do was go play football at Ole Miss. And, of course, he wasn't talented enough to do so. Wasn't going to be able to do that. Didn't have the size, didn't have the skill. May have had the heart, but he just wasn't an SEC prospect. And, again, as I mentioned earlier, borderline junior college prospect. He goes, but Steve, that guy, he had such a great day. Got to get his picture made in the Ole Miss IPF. It was his dream at some point to play at Ole Miss. And for one day, he got to practice in the IPF, the same IPF that his favorite players do. And that conversation changed the way that I looked at evaluating prospects and how I ran football camps and things like that forever. Because it's not just about the big-name guys. Because everybody wants to go, oh, I can get this guy. I can get Chad Bumpus and Fletcher Cox and Tyler Russell and Cameron Lawrence. And I lived that too. Because when scouts stopped doing camps in Mississippi, I complained about it. And you're like, hey, well, if you think you can do better, do your own camp. I did. But I also began to understand too, there's guys like Fletcher Cox and Denias Timms and, that group of kids, Josh Boyd, Pat Patterson, Ben Sanders, they didn't need a camp. They were established at that point. If we had Vince come to Tupelo when he was an underclassman, he was sophomore, guy had a good career at Ole Miss. But what we did is we began to kind of change to make our camps a little more inclusive. Rather than kind of limit schools and say, hey, I really want this kid. And sometimes you'd have to take this kid because he had the car, right? Or his dad was going to bring everybody. So you have to make those deals. And so when I think about the fact that we got 517 kids on camp today, I think back to that conversation. How many young people that were on campus today at Mississippi State have no chance of playing here? The majority of them. Over 500 kids, you only got, 3 kids there that had offers. And so it's like you look at it and you begin to think, well, so why would you have them here? Well, number one, it's relationship building, but also, too, the NCAA says you can't have invitation-only camps. And why would you really want them? And I can understand if you had the one camp, right? Maybe you've top dog or big dog camp, whatever you want to call it these days. If that was a little more inclusive, you kind of understand it. But you got to have camps like this. You got to have these open camps, these cattle call type camps where anybody can come. Because everybody has a dream. And how many of those young men today are going to say, you know what? I got out there and I got a chance to work with Coach Jeff Phelps as a defensive lineman. I got a chance to work under the supervision of Coach Steve Spurrier Jr. as a wide receiver. And they're going to leave here today and think, man, it was one of the greatest days of my life. And as a young person, I'm going to walk out here and say, you know what? I may not have been good enough to play at Mississippi State, but their coaches weren't too good to coach me. Their coaches weren't too good to get out there and instruct me. And listen, let's be honest. Looking at these receivers today, there's a couple guys that look pretty decent. Maybe some underclassmen that become prospects later. But, Steve Spurrier and Mason Miller and those guys, they're working just as hard for those guys that'll never get a Mississippi State scholarship offer than they are the ones that do. And it's got to be frustrating. I've never heard anybody say it. And, of course, they love the game and they want to help young people improve within our state and have a chance to get better as prospects. They do, whether they come here or go somewhere else. But the reality of this is that a lot of these guys went out there and spent, about 6 hours in the heat to coach a bunch of kids that will never play at Mississippi State. And they didn't dog the effort. They didn't just go out there and just kind of go through the motions. You get out there and you see your coaches out there coaching your kids or your neighbor's kids or kids from your community and your high school, coaching them like they're prospects. It's inspiring. And it's not just, something that's germane to Mississippi State. But I began to think about, it's like, I get out here and there's not a lot of content opportunities. It's not about me. It's not about my day. I'm out there trying to find a story to write about a kid that's got a dream, right? But how many of those kids will never be interviewed, never have their photographs taken? Hey, Bulldog business owners, if you're like me, I know exactly what my business needs. Sometimes it's difficult to find the right candidate. Today, there's so many people out there in the job market making it so competitive. It's almost like an interviewee's market. Maybe it's time to flip the script and bring in the hiring power of your friends at Indeed. Instead of spending hours upon hours on multiple job sites or combing through resumes for candidates that might not even have the right skills for you, Indeed's powerful hiring partnership can help you do it all. With Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description. The moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed.com, you're going to get results. That's one of the best things about it. And here's the deal. Being a Boneyard listener, we're going to give you a little incentive to give our friends at Indeed a try. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job posts at Indeed.com/Boneyard. That offer is only good for a limited time. You can claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/Boneyard. Indeed.com/Boneyard. Some terms and conditions may apply, but we're here to help you find the right candidates to fill all the vacancies at your business.
Cedar Point's Frontier Festival is back and brimming with new flavor. From May 26th through June 19th, this Old West-inspired street fest will fill Cedar Point with live bands, nightly hoedowns, and a hubbub of family activities. Yep, you'll find wheelbarrows packed with sunflowers and characters straight out of the frontier, but you'll also discover 25 cherry-inspired dishes and over 65 cocktails, seltzers, and beers. Get all the fixins, plus savings to boot with the Frontier Festival Bundle, which includes admission, parking, and a tasting card. Only at cedarpoint.com.
But for one day, they were made to feel a little bit like a big deal on the Mississippi State campus. And that means a lot to me. It really does. There were some guys there that have offers. Linebacker Tobias Hinton out of Hattiesburg High School. Now, the first thing that I will tell you, he is not as tall as I expected. I don't know what he lists, but he is a good-looking prospect, but perhaps not exactly what I anticipated. I watched him some in drills, had a chance to get a couple pictures of him, and he is a Division I player. Is he an SEC guy? I don't know yet. He is leaning Mississippi State's way, and we're going to have a linebacker-heavy and a linebacker and DB-heavy class this year. But, I think he's a good prospect. I do. Can he play here? Yeah, he can. I think so. But he's a guy that's already kind of embraced the weight room, but he's got to get a little bit bigger. You've got to get a little bit bigger and stronger. A lot of times I compare these linebackers. I think about the guys that have been great linebackers at Mississippi State. I think about Bernard McKinney or KJ Wright or Errol Thompson, Willie Gay. We hadn't had a Willie Gay type in a while. I mean, that's been, even Willie just left. But, Mississippi, I don't think has really produced that quality of linebacker in a little while. And so we need that to happen. Surely from an athletic standpoint, you've got to be able to have a guy like that every once in a while. I think there are some guys in this state that can play. I think maybe Hinton is one of those guys. But when I compare him to Willie Gay, at that time in his development, Willie Gay was a little bit bigger and stronger, had a little bit better length. And so I think this Hinton is probably a guy that could be in the class. I don't know that he's a guy that you push to get into class right now. But this guy is, without a doubt, a Division I football player. There's no question about it. He's got a ton of offers. But I'll be honest with you, I like his film maybe more than I do like some other guys. I just wish he'd have been a little bit bigger. Just a little bit bigger and maybe a little bit taller. But the reality of it is I absolutely would not pass on him. I think this is a guy that can absolutely play at Mississippi State. And even if he's like your second or third linebacker in your class, I think you feel great about that. I think he can really play. Now, Cadarius Wade out of Callaway is another guy that's got an offer from Mississippi State. Now, he was first listed as a wide receiver, and he kind of has that build. He is a little more thinly framed. KJ Wright was thinly framed too, playing defensive end up at Olive Branch, ended up playing, National Football League for a long time too. And so, Wade, I think, has, the opportunity to kind of expand the frame a little bit and put some mass on, but he is very wiry right now. Very wiry. If you see the picture that I took and put on his 247 profile, you kind of see what I'm talking about. He is the guy right now that is not SEC game ready. And he doesn't have to be. He's got another year of high school left to go. But he is a guy that I think will probably need a year or two in the weight room. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Tim Washington. Remember Tim? And Tim's working on our strength and conditioning staff now. Only graduated here a couple years ago. But Tim was a guy that was very, very thin, and then he kind of worked his way in, had a really good senior season for Mississippi State. Really did. But probably would have had a better career had he been able to kind of put some mass on early on. And so that's the kind of thing that I kind of caution myself about in my own evaluation is like, how many times in the past have I seen this guy and it takes him 3 years? It takes him 3 years to kind of become a factor. And listen, Tim's a guy that could have left, could have transferred, could have said, hey, I want to go somewhere else, but he didn't. And I remember sitting in Tony Woolfolk's office at Yazoo City High School. And he said Tim Washington was the best player to come through Yazoo City since Fletcher Cox. Don't know if it's true or not, but that was his estimation, and he coached both of them. And Tim Washington, maybe a marginal SEC guy. I think he proved as a senior year that he belonged here. But what we want to do is kind of speed up the developmental curve. We don't want to have a guy that is, maybe a career special teams guy, and then finally as a senior, he's able to contribute on the two deep, right? I see Wade in kind of the same mold as him from a physicality standpoint. I don't know that he's not better served, maybe playing defensive back. Don't know what the foot speed timing looked like. No clue. There was so many kids out there was no way to keep up. But that's a guy that I think, again, a Division I ball player all the way. I don't like him quite as much as I like Tobias Hinton. I think Tobias Hinton is a better prospect. I think Tobias Hinton is a guy, too, that you look at him frame-wise and say this guy's going to be able to carry some mass without hurting his foot speed or his dexterity. I do think Cadarius Wade is a guy that you will hear something from. I don't expect him to be in our class unless some things change. But we'll kind of see how things progress. Offensive line prospect Joe Crocker. I'm thinking about Joe Crocker. She wrote me the letter. Joe Crocker took an official visit to Mississippi State last week, was back this week with his mom and younger brother, who was a camper today at Mississippi State. Now, Joe is a guy, basically we heard early on that Joe was going to make his decision this summer. So he wanted to take his official visits in June. Now, that's not the Mississippi State philosophy. And when we have tried doing those official visits in June, it really hadn't worked out. I think Braden Locke is like the only one that took the summer official visit and then ultimately signed with Mississippi State. But Joe is one of these guys that, hey, I want to get my visits out of the way. I want to get my decision out of the way so I can focus on my senior year and have a good time with my friends. I don't want the recruiting aspect of life to be a distraction. I want to be able to enjoy my senior year. And he is one of those guys that I actually believe it. There are a lot of guys that say that, then they get kind of caught up in the hype and everything. I just don't think Joe has that kind of personality. Now, Joe has already officially visited Wisconsin. He has officially visited Mississippi State. He is from the Tennessee area, the greater Nashville area, huge Tennessee Titans fan. And then he's set to visit Michigan State next, and then that's it. He had talked about visiting Texas A&M. He talked about visiting a handful of other schools, and he goes, you know what, I'm not going to take those visits in the fall now. I'm going to make my commitment. I'm going to shut things down. And so the thing you look at is like, okay, Joe could have easily sat home today. He didn't have to come back down here. He was just here last weekend. But he came up and actually spent some time with your offensive lineman. Some of the guys that were hosting him around last weekend, showing him a good time, telling him about what it means to be a Bulldog. He wanted to come back and hang out with those guys too. It wasn't just about his brother. Lucas Taylor and those guys, they're his buddies now. And so I'm beginning to feel a little more optimistic about this one. You kind of came in out of nowhere, and so we were going to bring him in on the official visit. And again, our batting average is not very good, when it comes to those June official visits. I'm not a big proponent of them either. I'm sure the Big Ten is. I'm sure Wisconsin and Michigan State's like, we better get that kid here in June, because if he comes in December when there's 27,000 feet of snow, we got no chance to get him. So you bring him in the summer, and everybody's like, hey, this is cool. It's not so bad. They don't tell you about the Russian winter that you have to live in the Big Ten up there. But Joe is a guy that's got some options. Joe is an offensive line prospect that has some pro potential. This is a guy, too, kind of a building block you look at and you begin to think, well, this would make perfect sense for Mississippi State to take this guy. So he'll go to Michigan State. He has shared that there is a little bit of concern about the number of offensive linemen Michigan State takes, and many of those are returning next year. And I'll be honest with you, Joe looks like those big Paul Bunyan type Big Ten linemen. Like, kind of like what Brett Bielema had in Wisconsin. I mean, that's what he looks like. Those corn-fed guys, right? Well, that's kind of what we're running now too, right? At Mississippi State, we want those big, rangy, long-limbed offensive line prospects. And so Joe kind of fits here too. And I think part of the issue too is the fact that it is a little bit closer to home. Not that Joe just feels this undying desire to stay close to home, but I think there's a part of him too, a chance to play in the Southeastern Conference and a chance to be reasonably close to home, weather that he's used to, right? Sometimes this time of year, I always think to myself, I don't think people fully appreciate it. We've kind of grown up with this, and even though this feels like late summer weather and early summer, we're kind of accustomed to it. But people come in for the first time and they're like, oh my gosh, it's just sweltering here. Well, Joe's like, that's what it's same like this in Nashville. It's the same thing. I would submit to you, it's probably a little warmer here with the humidity anyway. But the reality of it is he's a guy from the South. And so I think that's interesting. And I think that we have the chance to put together a really good offensive line. I think Mason Miller has done a good job here the last couple of classes. And I think when you begin to think about what we could potentially stack together in this class, that gives you 3 really good offensive line classes in a row. 3 in a row. Now, some of those guys, too, maybe not rate quite as high as others. Like Gabe Cavazos, I had a chance to see him at Lake Cormorant High School. Gabe Cavazos can play. Now, we get him down here and we figure out, okay, that he's a guard. He's not a tackle. And you know what? That's okay. And all of a sudden, Gabe is beginning to thrive. I've seen Gabe recently, had a chance to talk to him. Gabe's happy here. You know, and you remember in the beginning, he was an early high school grad, and he got here and left and went home, took his classes online, didn't know if he's going to come back. But he did. He's grown. He's matured. And so when I begin to think about our evaluation, maybe as an industry, compared to what Mason Miller and Mike Leach and the staff comes up with, are not always going to align. There are going to be some guys they like because they fit their system. They may not be guys that fit everybody else's system. So as a result, they may not rate as high. They may not be high in the rankings. And you know what? That's completely okay. Rankings matter, but it's not the be-all, end-all. And so when I began to think about, you got Malik Ellis already, who is a guy that idolizes Charles Cross. Big-time player. It's amazing to me how athletic he is, but he has got to add some mass. He is a guy that is going to have to really get serious when he gets in the weight room, but also, too, working in conjunction with the diet and nutrition staff to make sure that he is adding mass the way that he should. Then you begin to think about Zay Alexander, who was here at Top Dog Camp. Zay says, you know what, I'm probably going to stay in state, probably going to stay closer to home. Ole Miss has been involved with him. We're involved with him. He is one of his best friends, Jacarius Clayton's here at Mississippi State. You may recall Jacarius was committed to state, flipped to Ole Miss, flipped back to state. I believe that's the first time in my career that I remember it working like that. And it's weird, like last year, like DeCarlos Nicholson also decommitted from us to Kentucky and then flipped back. What does that say about your coaching staff? There are a lot of coaching staffs in the past that have gotten their feelings hurt and said, oh, I can't believe they would embarrass us like that and just move on from them. Well, they're the same player you loved and offered the first time. Maybe you got your feelings hurt. Let's put our boots on and roll our sleeves up and get out here and start hitting back a little bit, right? And so you had some of that last year. But when I think about, you get Malik Ellis, you get Zay Alexander from Tupelo High School, and let's say you get Joe Crocker, and let's say you get Anthony Miles out of Alabama, all of a sudden I'm starting to think, you know what, hey, we don't have to worry about this offensive line piece for a while. I think we'll take at least 4, maybe 5. We went into portal season thinking maybe we'd get another one. I am glad we didn't go sign a guy just to sign a guy. We didn't need to go sign a warm body. I'm not going to mention any names, but in the past sometimes it's like, oh, we got to get a lineman, and so we go hire some practice dummy. We go, sign some guy. All they're going to do is help us facilitate practice. It's just a waste of a scholarship. I'm not going to mention any names, but there have been times we've reached. I'm glad we didn't reach because, we're going to need that scholarship eventually anyway. So rather than give it to a guy that's never going to contribute just so we can facilitate practice, let's just hold it. And that's what we've done. We offered a couple guys. They didn't want to come. And so rather than just say, well, we got to go get a body, and it reminds me, too, of a guy that I worked with a long time ago, and he said, you know what, I'd rather have a hole than a butthole. And a butthole can come in a number of forms, right? You have guys that give you trouble, but guys that also, too, that can't get right. You don't want to go sign some guy that's just going to be an irritant to you. You want to sign guys that are going to contribute. Football's hard enough without going and signing a guy that can't play here. So I began to think about this offensive line class. I think Joe could be a really big part of things. I think Anthony Miles could be a really big part of things. And you get Zay Alexander. All of a sudden, I'm starting to think, you know what? We are recruiting offensive linemen on a consistent basis, perhaps better than we ever have. When J.B. Grimes was here, J.B. was so great at finding these diamonds in the rough that kind of fit what Sylvester Croom wanted, right? So when Dan Mullen and John Hevesy got here, you already had Addison Lawrence. You already had J.C. Brignone. You had Tobias Smith. You had Quentin Salisbury. You had Derek Sherrod. This state will produce offensive linemen. You just got to be willing to dig for them and then sometimes be a little bit patient with their development. And so when I start thinking about what we've done, we have gone out and found the developmental offensive linemen, but we've also expanded our recruiting footprint. And because of the scheme that we've run, guys like Cannon Boone, those guys, Jackson, others, out-of-state guys are like, hey, I want to go play in that scheme. That's a fun thing to play in. And so, again, tomorrow's 7-on-7 day. We'll probably see some dudes tomorrow. I don't know if anybody picks up an offer, but we'll probably see some guys that you guys are more familiar with, and we'll talk about that on Monday. I'm not going to hang out there all day because I want to watch college baseball, but I'm going to go out there and take a look and talk to some players, get some pictures and things like that, so we can load up those 247 sports.com profiles for everybody. But just wanted to kind of give you guys, again, I don't want to be in any way disrespectful to the 500 some odd kids that came today, but there just weren't a lot of bona fide, surefire SEC guys there today. There may be some guys that kind of turn into that. And there's some out-of-state guys perhaps that we're not as familiar with. But today, in many respects, was just kind of a bigger camp and a chance for us to get a lot of people here to kind of have the Mississippi State experience. And I suspect tomorrow is kind of like that too. We'll have a handful of guys, but you're not going to have private workouts and things like that. It's a 7-on-7 tournament. And I understand there's going to be 32 teams there. It's a big tournament. We went from having 24 to 32. So that's a really, really big tournament. So we'll see how things go and progress, and we'll talk about that on Monday's show. But I just, again, wanted to give you an update on some of the names perhaps that you know, and also to kind of give some insight into how important these camps can be to kind of further the Mississippi State branding. It is now time for the Top 10 list, brought to you by closewithblair.com. That's C-L-O-S-E with Blair.com. I tell you what, before we do that, let's do our Prime Shrimp Player of the Day. We don't have a game going on, but I will give our award today to Joe Crocker, offensive line prospect. And at this point, I'm beginning to feel like he is going to be a Bulldog. So at some point, I think Joe is going to be a guy that could be instrumental in Mississippi State winning some ball games. So just like Joe being dependable, so are our friends at primeshrimp.com. Visit them at primeshrimp.com. Use promo code Boneyard to save $20 off your order. You'll be glad you did. The great, great delicacy of shrimp. Everybody thinks, man, it'd be great to have some shrimp. I want to get it out. I want to go eat out, but sometimes it's so expensive, and nowadays the prices on everything are rising. Primeshrimp.com, that's not the case. Visit them, check them out. You'll be glad you did. New Orleans-based shrimping company, been in business since the 1940s. These guys know everything there is to know about the shrimping business. You've heard that line before. The truth of the matter is, it applies to them. 4 great flavors to choose from. I'm very partial to that French Quarter Alfredo. I like seafood fettuccine. I like shrimp fettuccine. I like it all the way around. So you can boil up, a pot of fettuccine noodles, and then also to top it with some of this prime shrimp Alfredo, and the sauce comes with it. You get the simply seasoned. You can get the Louisiana shrimp bowl. There's 4 great flavors. None of them will have you thinking lesser than. You'll feel like you've gotten more than your money's worth. And there's a money-back guarantee, too. If you like it, you keep it. You feel great about life. You order some more. If you don't, you can let them know. They'll give your money back. How many places give you a money-back guarantee on food? Primeshrimp.com. Promo code Boneyard. All right, let's get in the top 10 list. Close with Blair.com. Blair Chandler is a mortgage professional. I've shared with you guys before, if you're looking to refinance your mortgage or look in the market to get a mortgage, second mortgage, HELOC, anything to do with mortgage lending, Blair can handle for you. And maybe perhaps that you're a non-conforming borrower. Maybe you're atypical. Maybe you're a person that because of your financial situation, maybe you're not maybe the most advantageous borrower. Maybe you're not very attractive in that respect. Blair can help you with that. Blair is a guy that's seen it all and done it all. He shared a graphic with me recently, had a very motivated buyer, and they went from basically open to close in less than 10 days. And that's not always going to work out because it's a very long and laborious process at times, but you need to go with a guy that is motivated to get things done, to get you in your new home sooner rather than later. Give Blair a text or call today at 601-500-2344. Again, 601-500-2344. Blair works for Fairway Mortgage, recently voted #1 in customer satisfaction when it came to mortgage lending. And again, I like people to get things done. That's Blair. Blair gets things done. A good guy, a good bulldog. Mention to him you heard about him on the Boneyard. He's going to pay for your appraisal. Some added value in doing business within the Bulldog family. Closewithblair.com. All right, top 10. We're going to do top 10 rock instrumentals today. Now, this, I know somebody is going to message me and have a great song that I miss. Matter of fact, Roy's already said, hey, what about this? What about that? You didn't have Green Onions. And I didn't. We've had Green Onions on the show before. We didn't do YYZ from Rush either, though we do have a Rush song on the list. So let's get to it. Number 10, one of my favorite instrumentals of all time, and a little bit obscure. Maybe you're unfamiliar with this. Perhaps you are. I suspect many of you will be. I absolutely love this song. I've shared it with many, many people over the years. It is a 80s guitarist by the name of Tony McAlpine. And the song is Tears of Sahara. We've had it on the show before. I absolutely love it. It's very melodic. It's also got a little speed to it as well. But it is a guitar song at its core, and many of these instrumentals are basically a chance for people to kind of show off their chops a little bit. Perhaps no greater example, and perhaps I should have put this higher on the list, is the number 9 song from the band Extreme. It was originally on the first release of the Extreme 2 Porno Graffiti album. I don't know if it's on iTunes as the studio version. The live version is out there, but it's Extreme's Flight of the Wounded Bumblebee. Nuno Betancourt absolutely just shreds on this one. It's one of those things, too. It's like I have a guitar, and I play it poorly. Nuno Betancourt makes it all seem so easy, and it's like it's not even the same instrument. It's like it's just ridiculous how good he is. Number 8, we did get a Rush song on here, and it's Lavila Strangita, and I may be mispronouncing that. Very dark and type ominous song. It's very lengthy. It's a progressive rock song. I think it totals out about 10 minutes. Wanted to get Rush on here. I didn't want to just go with YYZ. A lot of people go with that because it's a classic song, and it is. But Rush has a handful of instrumentals that maybe aren't as well known as YYZ. So there you go. Number 7, and I believe this is the Boneyard Top 10 debut for Yngwie Malmsteen. When I was a young buck in South Mississippi, and we were all into guitar rock, and we all wanted to play, we could play a few power chords here and there, and then all of a sudden, this album, and the first time that I heard was Yngwie Malmsteen's Rising Force. He was doing things that nobody else was doing at the time. And really had trouble sometimes with singers. He and Joe Lynn Turner had a couple albums together. I think that's probably the best duo as far as like singer-guitar player of the Yngwie experience. But Yngwie is remarkable. And you can find some albums out there and some orchestral performances with Yngwie on guitar that'll absolutely blow your mind. So we're going to go with Far Beyond the Sun. Almost went with Black Star here, but Far Beyond the Sun I think is probably maybe a little bit better. They do perform Black Star live these days, but Far Beyond the Sun is just absolutely phenomenal. All right, classic rock here. Number 6, it's the Almond Brothers. The Almond Brothers is another band. The Mountain Jam is a cool track too. Didn't have it on here. But they have a handful of instrumentals in their catalog that are very, very popular. But we went with the most popular one of all, and it's Jessica. The dual guitars on it are just ridiculous. I love the Almond Brothers. You guys loved that list when we did that one, so I wanted to bring that one back. Number 5, another one making their debut. And I suspect probably the last time we'll ever talk about this particular artist and this particular song on the show. And you have heard this song, and maybe you didn't know the name of it or who performed it. But it is The Cliffs of Dover by Eric Johnson, another phenomenal guitarist. It's another one of those songs, too. It's almost like a modern-day composition. It's crazy. Number 4, probably the guy that brought it all back in many respects. A lot of people did like instrumental, like guitar stuff as intros to songs. But Joe Satriani was a guy that I guess couldn't find a singer. And so he let his guitar do the singing for him. And so we're going to go back to the one that really introduced Joe Satriani into our lives. And that is the song Surfing with the Alien. How about that? Incredible. Incredible. And there's a lot of talk, too, that Joe is going to play guitar on perhaps a Van Halen tribute tour. Like he would play the Eddie Van Halen part. They'd go out and do a tour. And so I don't know how I feel about that. I've read several articles about it. And Joe said, oh, it's not true. Michael Anthony said it was. Those two guys, of course, worked with Sammy Hagar and Chickenfoot. If you're unfamiliar with that act, I'd encourage you to go check them out. Number 3, and I really believe the top 3, I think these are kind of undisputed. Number 3 is Edgar Winter's Frankenstein. If you're unfamiliar with that song, you're going to absolutely love it. You probably have heard it, but there's all this cacophony in this thing, and it's like you begin to wonder, I mean, did anybody tune their instruments and stuff? But it all comes together so wonderfully. I absolutely love the track. The Winter Brothers were phenomenal too. Edgar Winter, though, with Frankenstein, that is just one of those songs that I think most people are familiar with, but maybe aren't certain who performed it. All right, number 2, Led Zeppelin. Now, we could have gone a few different directions here, but we went with Moby Dick. It's the iconic drum solo of John Bonham, and what a phenomenal performance it was. And they did it live for years and years and years. But Moby Dick from Led Zeppelin, number 2 on your list. But number 1, and this may be one of the greatest guitar performances of all time. I mean, it really could be. And it's the Georgia Satellites. No, it's not the Georgia Satellites. It's Eddie Van Halen's Eruption. How about that? Van Halen's Eruption. And, I was a kid, and all of a sudden we heard this, and like, well, where are the lyrics? And it's like, they didn't need any. Just this incredible performance on the guitar. It really kind of changed music in many respects. I think a lot of people looked at Eddie Van Halen and said, how is he capable of doing all of this? I mean, he was really a virtuoso in many respects. And so I'm really sad that he's gone. I mean, I still think about that. It's like, there's some talk out there. There's some Van Halen stuff that's unfinished. They plan to finish and release at some point. I hope they do. I hope we get some more Chris Cornell and Eddie Van Halen in our lives. And I understand, too, there's still some extensive stuff in the Prince catalog that wasn't released either. So maybe we'll get that music at some point. I don't know what the point in holding it is, but there's a lot going on with Van Halen right now, so we'll kind of see how things go. And I do think we get some music at some point, some things that maybe were unfinished, and I suspect we'll probably appreciate them a lot more knowing that this will be the final stuff. And I will say, too, while we're discussing that sort of thing, Queen is going to be releasing a Freddie Mercury single. It was a song that was kind of dug back in the archives. It was never finished. And so they have finished it through the magic of technology. And they're going to release that too. And it's believed to be the last known unreleased recording of Freddie Mercury. And I look forward to that. I'm a huge Freddie Mercury and Queen fan. And I know many of you will as well. And so we're not getting any younger. Like our rock heroes are dying off. And really bummed, too. I was supposed to be on vacation. I had to cancel my trip to Atlanta. I was supposed to go to Atlanta for the opening night of the stadium tour with Motley Crue and Def Leppard and Poison and Joan Jett, and was unable to go, and notified my buddy Sam. I was like, Sam, I can't go. We're going to take a cruise. And then we ended up canceling the cruise, and then I couldn't go that either. And so I missed the cruise and the crew. And so I'm bummed about both. But, we'll get out and go see some things, too. And I encourage you to, whenever you can. Listen, I listen, outdoor venues aren't always for me. I'll be honest with you. I love going, but I'm so active at shows. It's like I don't want to be disgusting when I'm done. And but going out there sitting in the sun sometimes doesn't really appeal to me. But when you have a chance to go watch one of these classic rock acts, and it doesn't matter if they're country or R&B or whatever, if there is an artist that you love and they're touring in your area, I encourage you to go because it may be the last time we get to see them. And of course, life is not guaranteed to any of us, but many of these rock stars are aging out. David Coverdale and Whitesnake making their final tour, and I hope to get a chance to go see those guys too. But the reality of it is, I don't think it'll be like the Kiss tour. The Kiss tour lasts forever. It's the final tour, and it's been the final tour for a decade now. But again, I encourage you to get out and go. Bring your kids. Go with your kids. Like I took Ani to see Whitesnake. We saw 13 shows that year, and I asked him at the end of the year, what was your favorite show? He said Whitesnake, because those guys are real rock stars, and yes, they are. They don't look like they just finished up a double shift at Subway and came out there and walked on stage and picked up a guitar. Those guys are committed to their art. Much different dynamic. There's some people that just kind of play guitar for fun, to meet chicks and that sort of stuff. It doesn't work out that way. I appreciate people that really spend some time kind of honing their craft. And so I like those guys. I do. All right. Next segment of the show brought to you by campusbookmart.net. I love Campus Bookmart. You will too. If you're unfamiliar with Campus Bookmart, let me encourage you, next time you're in Starkville, go by and meet them. The lovely, talented Susie, the best buyer in the Mississippi State merchandising market, Miss Kathy Brown, and of course Miss Pam Minyard, and many others, doing a great job for a great fan base at a great price. They'll treat you like family because in their minds you are family. Simple as that. Simple as that. If you can't make it to town, visit them on the World Wide Web at campusbookmart.net. Use promo code BSR, which stands for Beautiful Steve Robertson, and that gets you free shipping on all orders over $50. Any orders less than $50, absolutely incomplete. And you know how it is with Amazon, right? It's like, and I sometimes I got to shop Amazon too, but not for Mississippi State merch. I just will not do it. I'm going to buy locally. But sometimes you think, well, hey, you bought this, but for $7 more, you don't have to pay shipping. Well, that's me. I'm going to do it. And so it's nice to have a little promo code through Campus Bookmart. You can kind of do the same, because most of you guys need to kind of outfit your family for the upcoming football season anyway, because the kids have outgrown the clothes from last year. Maybe you have too. But again, campusbookmart.net. Look no further when you're looking for Mississippi State merchandise. All right, let's talk a little baseball portal stuff. That has really dominated the conversation over at genespage.com. We've had so many people kind of contribute, things that they have heard, things that they like, players they hope wear the maroon and white. And there's a ton of them. There are. So based on what I've heard, I think we're going to we got 3 guys now that are committed to transfer to Mississippi State. I expect at least 3 more. Probably more than that. I know some people are thinking we need to go out and sign, 10, 15 players. That's not the case. I don't believe that's the case at all. And I think it's important for people to kind of understand that we have a really good signing class coming in. Now, you don't want to just depend on first-year players, right? You don't want to have guys that are just finishing up prom and then having, because not everybody's Hunter Hines or Jake Mangum. But you're going to have some guys contribute on the pitching side. They're going to be on the young side. But we've got to find some veteran arms out there, and I think that's where things are kind of trending at this moment. Talk last night about some guys that I wanted to share with you guys here on the show. I think it's important to understand that your staff is working hard to find the right players. Now, Zach DeVito from Tulane, that name should be familiar to you because Zach DeVito was part of both of Tulane's wins over us this year. And maybe that weekend, we hadn't really wanted to talk about it much because of all we lost that weekend. But we might have actually found somebody. Zach DeVito, ERA of just over 4. That's a little bit high for a guy that we expect to work on the back end. But 19 appearances this year with a 4-1 record, 9 saves, just 24.2 innings pitched. He is definitely a high-impact, high-effort guy. Allowed 19 hits, 11 runs, 13 walks to 40 strikeouts, just 4 extra base hits. I think that's the guy that, with a 4-pitch mix, can really get those last 3 to 6 outs for you. And we've got to find a closer. We've got to have somebody on the back end. If we'd had a closer this year, you'd probably win 10 more games. It's as simple as that. Zach is in the portal. I think he is a guy that is a name to remember. I can't say yet that he's going to be a guy that you look at and say, well, definitely will be on the roster. But I think when you look at what's out there and you look at the available opportunities that are out there, I think Mississippi State's in a good position with him. Now, that's not the only pitcher. I want to run this down for you, too. There is a freshman All-American from Stetson. You know, Stetson has kind of been a very solid mid-major over the years and a team that has had some NCAA tournament experience. And so they traditionally do a good job of finding those guys that are kind of existing, you know, between the Florida State and Miami recruiting footprint out there. Dominic Stagliano is his name, a freshman All-American from Boynton Beach, Florida. Had a great year for those guys and arguably the best pitcher on the Hatter staff. And how nice would it be to have him? A guy that worked some as a spot starter, worked some as a middle relief guy. We've got to have some guys to eat up those innings. If we'd have had this guy on our roster, again, you know, how many games do you win? 3.21 ERA, a 5-0 record, 18 appearances, 3 starts, and a couple of saves. Had 1 shutout as well. How about that? 53.1 innings pitched, and considering the number of appearances compared to the rest of that roster, he is a guy that pitched regularly for them on the weekends as a reliever. Some pretty gaudy numbers here. 55 strikeouts against just 12 walks. He did give up some extra base hits. Got barreled up a little bit. You expect that for a freshman. But 55 strikeouts in any league is really good. Now, what will he do against SEC hitting? Well, that really kind of remains to be seen. We just really don't know yet kind of how it works. And, he did pitch against Florida this year. Had a bit of a rough outing there. 2 1/3 innings pitched, 6 hits, 3 runs, 3 strikeouts, and then 4 doubles. He allowed 11 doubles the entire year. 4 of them come in that game. And then he pitched against Florida State. You can say, well, Steve, maybe he's not a Power 5 guy. Florida State, 3 innings pitched, no hits, no runs, no walks, 5 strikeouts. What does that sound like? And that's in a 6-0 shutout. He was the middle reliever there in a ball game, but they did a really good job. And so he has faced some Power 5 teams this year. Started against Sacred Heart, Maine, and then Jacksonville. Jacksonville, his final appearance of the year was a start. He worked 7 innings, 5 hits, 2 runs. Both of those earned, no walks, 2 Ks, 1 double, a triple, and it's a 5-3 win. Just an efficient 89 pitches and 7 innings pitched. And so this is a guy, too, that got better as the year went along. Allowed 19 earned runs this year, 6 of those in his last 3 outings. But in the 3 outings prior to that, he allowed just 1 earned run in 5 appearances. Now, that's kind of getting it done for you right there. So a guy, again, not a huge strikeout guy, a pitch-to-contact guy. I think you feel pretty good if you're able to add him. And he is a guy, too, I think you look at and you begin to think, okay, we've got to have some guys that have some pro potential come in here and eat up innings for us, even if that is in a middle relief role. We've got to find that. We absolutely do. Landon Gartman's coming in. He could be a starter, could be a long reliever, could be pretty much whatever we want him to be. Another name that's kind of been mentioned, and there's some social media traffic about him, is Joe Miller. Joe has actually played 4 years at Penn University. He is a guy originally from Hatboro, Pennsylvania. Went to Penn and had 13 appearances this year. And was probably the workhorse on this staff. Didn't always get a lot of run support, and control was a little bit of an issue. And you've got to find some guys out there that can match up, with left-handers. And he is a left-hander, and there's just not a lot out there. So that's a possibility. I don't know that State is ready to kind of pull the trigger on this one. But this is a guy, too, again, that has done a good job. He's got 4 years of experience, and due to the COVID year, still has another year of eligibility to work. Second lowest ERA among the starters, 3.63 ERA, 6-4 record, 13 appearances, 11 of those starts, 74 innings pitched, which was a staff high. Allowed 64 hits. He is very much a pitch-to-contact guy, but does get some Ks to kind of go along with that. 91 strikeouts, which led the team. That's 91-36, right there at 3-1. Opponents hit 234 against him. The wild pitches are a little bit high. He had 10 wild pitches, and of course he pitched more innings, so you'd expect him to be a little bit higher than most. But that's still a little bit of a concerning number. and then 3 hit by pitches. And that's something, we've had games, we've done that, and had 3 in an inning. But so there are some names out there that that you should be familiar with. And I fully expect to see State go really heavy on arms the rest of the way. Now, I couldn't close this segment without talking about Paul Skeens. Now, if you're familiar with Paul Skeens, he will likely be the favorite in many people's eyes for the Golden Spikes Award next year. I have had some conversations with people about him. He's a first-team All-American, and people are like, he can do it all for you. He's a big 6'6", strapping right-hander. Guy's got great velo, got a 3-pitch mix, and I'm told that he actually has a four. He can throw a traditional curveball, but it's really more of a fastball, slider, changeup type situation for him. But he can throw a breaking ball, can kind of change it up a little bit on you. A first-team All-American by Collegiate Baseball News, D1 Baseball, Baseball America, and then was on the Golden Spikes Award preseason watch list. He will be next year, no matter where he lands. He took an official visit to Mississippi State this week. Got some more visits to take. I understand LSU is part of it. Tennessee is part of it. And so, we're out here competing for a guy that many people believe could be the top transfer in the class. He is a guy that can catch. He is a guy that can pitch. He is a guy that can DH. He is a guy, too, that, chose to go to Air Force Academy. And you say, well, Steve, how do you transfer out of there? Well, if you do it between by your second year, you don't have to have, you don't have to go serve in the Air Force. So he's getting out of there, and he will be a first rounder in the 2023 draft. I don't think there's any question about that. So he could be the Friday night guy for State. He could also be a guy that DHs some for State. Could be a guy that catches part-time for State. We'll see how things go. But that's a big-time guy there. And many of you have asked about, Steve, we got to go get Tommy White from NC State. You can go ahead and forget that. You just can. There's a lot of discussion. He's going to stay in the state of Florida. He is a native of Florida, and I understand he grew up a Florida State fan. So this could be a scenario, too, where, it's like, hey, I didn't get the offer I wanted out of high school, but I've had this, freshman All-American year at NC State. Now I have that opportunity. Well, then, Florida State's made a coaching change, and they have not announced the new coach. And I understand that is part of the delay of him making a decision. Now, could be Link Jarrett, right? There are a lot of people that believe Link Jarrett is going to be the next coach at Florida State. I tend to agree. He played there. His dad played there. It's coming home for him. And so I think Link Jarrett, who is currently the head coach at Notre Dame, who has done a remarkable job. Notre Dame is a big-name school in football, but they just really haven't established a lot of tradition in baseball. And all of a sudden, Link Jarrett has ushered in kind of these glory days in South Bend. I just don't think they're going to be committed enough to keep him. And I think Florida State offers him the chance to go back home and revitalize a program that really college baseball needs to be good. And a lot of people thought, when number 11 left, and Mike Martin left, that we would see that program take a little bit of a step back. Well, they promote junior. 3 years later, they're hiring another coach. And I firmly believe that Florida State would not have made this move without knowing they had somebody lined up. And I believe it's probably Link Jarrett. I think Notre Dame is going to have a terrible time keeping him. I think that they will probably make an effort to try to keep him. But I think, too, Link Jarrett has made Notre Dame, a better baseball program than he found it. So they'll be able to go out and get somebody and maybe kind of maintain a level of continuity there. But Link Jarrett goes to Florida State. I think Tommy White goes, and I think, again, that kind of galvanizes the fan base. I have heard that Florida and Tennessee both are working overtime to get him. But it's almost like, okay, if I grew up a Florida State fan, why would I go to Florida if I had a chance to go to Florida State? Now, one of the things I want to talk about, too, with this NIL stuff, there's a lot of NIL discussion out there as it relates to college baseball. You hear about it for football, and one of the things that I have heard, talking to administrators, is that there is a lot of apathy when it comes to NIL, too, for current student athletes. Now, some of that is because they just don't have it in their schedule. It's like, okay, well, I've got to get up here and go to study hall. I got to do my morning workout. I got team meetings. I got classes. Oh, you need me to drive down to Jackson to sign autographs for 2 hours? Okay, well, that's an hour and a half down there, 2 hours at the event, an hour and a half back, and I'm getting, $500? So it hardly seems worth it, right? When you begin to think about the time that you're allotted. And you can say, when I was a college kid, Steve, I would have done that easily. Well, times are a little different now. Not to mention between the stipend and the ousted money, it's a much different scenario. So you can't always get guys to go do stuff. But baseball, I think, is a little different because, number one, the money is probably not what you would anticipate. But a lot of these guys, too, just need the money to kind of facilitate the college experience. They're not full scholarship players in baseball. So all of a sudden, the NIL stuff is a little more valuable to them. And so they're more likely to go do stuff. When I remember I had a book signing at the Mill earlier this year, and Will Rogers and Landon Sims were there, and some other guys. Well, it makes perfect sense because it's right here in Starkville, and it's not a big commitment of your time. But when you look at it from a baseball standpoint, just about every baseball player graduates with bills, and they leave here with student loans they have to pay. And so it makes good sense to utilize NIL to help offset some of that expense for these young people. And so that is part of a lot of these recruiting discussions. And I think it's important that people kind of understand that. You can say, well, why would a guy not come to Mississippi State? Well, number one, he may like the other guys better. Sometimes it is as simple as that. The rest of that story is there may be a situation where, hey, maybe we're giving, $10,000, $15,000 in NIL incentives and somebody else is doubling that. And you can say, well, Steve, why can't we? Well, be a part of it. Go join the Bulldog Collective, right? Give them more resources to work with. That's the reality of life right now. And I don't think it's sustainable because I think in the end you're going to have some real issues. And it's like I think about, I've heard, and I won't mention the name of the player, but it's not somebody at Mississippi State. But I've heard about one particular transfer portal, and some of you guys, transfer portal player, and some of you guys can kind of fill in the gaps here. But I understand that there was one particular portal player that basically chose a school because he got over $200,000 to make the transfer. And so then you begin to ask yourself, okay, what if this guy gets hurt? What if he shows up on campus in fall baseball and he tears a rotator cuff, God forbid? What if he pulls a hamstring? What if he's not as productive? What if he can't play? What if he breaks a bone in his hand? Well, he's still entitled to that money because the NIL can't be predicated on athletic performance. It can't be a pay-for-play deal. So you can't get there and say, oh, well, he's on the shelf, so we're not going to pay him. And so what happens if you go spend all this money, you go to call up your big donors, up in Chicago or whatever, and you're like, hey, we need X amount of dollars to sign this player, and then you get him, and then he never contributes. How are you going to make that phone call the next time? Because that person's going to be like, you know what, I gave you guys $200,000, and I bankrolled this kid that never played. And so there's a lot to think about. And I think because of those type situations, and it is simply a matter of time before something like that happens, it's not sustainable. The rest of that story is that, what if you have that guy out there that let's say on football, because baseball is really becoming a 1 and 2 year sport. But let's say on the football side of things, you go out there and you chase a player and you make this big investment. Let's say you give $25,000 to help put together an NIL deal through your business to ensure that a certain player goes to your favorite school. Well, what do you do when he transfers? What if he gets there and he redshirts as a freshman and he figures out, hey, this isn't for me and I'm going to transfer? You going to ask for your money back? And so there are going to be some people that make investments that don't get the return on that investment. There are going to be people that get involved in this. They're going to see players basically take the money and run. And I've been told that there have been some players in the football transfer portal that have basically taken some money from other schools and then elected to stay where they were. Now, how does that happen? What do you do now? It's like, oh, we're going to give you this money if you come to our school. And then, it's like the way that I understand the NIL is that basically there has to be benefit for both parties. And so if somebody gives you money and they get nothing in return, then at that point could be considered an impermissible benefit, right? Which impacts your eligibility. And I would assume that the party involved, because they did things the correct way, they may feel like, hey, well, NCAA, we did this with the best of intentions, and then we paid him some money up front, as a bonus, and I don't know how that's orchestrated. I don't know how it's all constructed. I don't know what the NCAA's feelings are about that. I suspect you'd have to facilitate your end of the deal first and then be paid for your services later. But what if that's not the case? What if there are some people out there that have paid money up front and then now all of a sudden the player's gone? So there's still a lot to figure out. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Just when we think we've got NIL figured out and the way the spirit of the rule worked, and it's amazing how people have kind of taken it and twisted it for their own benefit. The way this is supposed to work is like, hey, these guys haven't been able to make any money and most of them can't get a job. Yeah, they get a stipend, but, we're selling their jersey. They benefit nothing from that. Let's give them the opportunity. And so that's what kind of, started all this. And, I go all the way back to, the lawsuit about EA Sports and all that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, they're selling these great video games, and then this kid's likeness is on here, and everybody would love to be on there, but they're making, millions of dollars. You got to share the wealth. And so that was one of those things, too, that was kind of groundbreaking. And so we thought, hey, well, we're just going to enable people to be compensated for their name, image, and likeness. Little did we know that people were going to bend this into what it's become. Now, a lot of people, a lot smarter than you and I, said when all of this immediate transfer stuff and the NIL stuff began to kind of bubble up together, so they're going to be tied together. People are going to be using name, image, and likeness compensation to get people to transfer to their schools. It's going to be part of the recruiting pitch. And people are like, oh, no, it's not. It's the Wild Wild West right now. It is. I mean, how do you enforce it? And it's so rampant right now. How in the world could you keep up? You can't. And there's all this discussion too about some of the guys that have been tampered with, and how do you penalize people for that? There's supposed to be a reduction of scholarships. There could be all this stuff that goes along with that. But again, how do you police it? How do you prove it? It's crazy. You say, well, there's going to be a paper trail. How many people out there are going to take the time and effort to go look at all that? You hear about these contracts too. I mean, I guess it was The Athletic that dug up. They got actual documents where you had high school players. They were signing 6- and 7-figure NIL deals over the course of their career. It's like, hey, if you come here and you are the face of our business and you come in, come to parties or whatever, and you take pictures and sign autographs, we're going to pay $1 million. And I began to ask myself, what type of value could a business get from a college athlete that's not a superstar? I mean, if Dak Prescott is the face of your business when he's here at Mississippi State, or Jake Mangum, even Tanner Allen, and T.A. wasn't a superstar his first year. But, you go get these guys and all of a sudden, can you really generate enough revenue to offset the expenditure of $1 million? I don't think you can. I mean, so it's basically legalized cheating in many respects. I didn't graduate with a degree in economics, but I know enough to know that, it's not a sustainable model if businesses don't make money on the investment. It's just not how business works. So I think it's important to understand we are going to see some changes. But right now, you're seeing NIL really be a big part of the transfer process when it comes to college baseball. And I don't know that anybody expected that to happen this fast. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But I think the reality of it is basically in any sport now, with the portal and the one-time transfer exception rule being on the books, and then legalized NIL contracts, you can see how people have gotten creative. All right, time to finish up strong here. I'm going to go watch some college baseball, and I'm tired. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I am tired. I'm not sleepy. I'm tired. You've been there. You know how it works. Sometimes you're ready to just go lay down. Just want to watch TV. I don't want to have to think or talk or answer the phone. All right, so let me give you Brooks Bryan's phone number. Brooks' phone number is 601-416-8075. Brooks, friend of mine. Brooks, friend of yours. Brooks part of a great group of folks that are bringing this wonderful residential development Portico to Starkville, making it a better place to live. Now, Phase 1 is completely sold out. We got 10 houses in Phase 2. A couple of those are already sold. And so you can have some say, too, because, Phase 2 is going to be rolled out kind of in 2 phases, right? And so you got the 10-house build now, but you've got some other lots that are allocated for future homes. So you can pick out your lot, you can pick out your house plans, so do some custom builds for you, and have you living 1.1 miles away from Duty Noble Field and a little bit farther from Davis Wade Stadium. It is 1.1 miles away from the Mississippi State campus. It's what you've always wanted, right? To have a place in Starkville. We'll look no further than Portico. Give Brooks a text or call today. If he misses you, he'll get right back to you. He's a busy guy, too. This is kind of part of a little side enterprise for him and several other Mississippi State people that love Starkville and want to give you a quality place to live. And it may be a situation where maybe it's not your primary residence. We hope that it is. I'd love for you to be our neighbor. But what if it's just like an investment property for you or a future retirement home? Maybe you're going to buy it now and, hey, this is our ballgame weekend retreat, but once we retire, we're going to move up there full time. Go ahead and get it knocked out now. And the thing that I love about it, too, is just the convenience. If I had to do it over, hey, the timing didn't work out for me, but if I was moving to Starkville now, I'd move to Portico because I would want to be that close to campus. I'd want to be that close to 82 and have the convenience of kind of getting out of town without having to fight all the traffic on 12 or go through some surface street in the middle of town to get to 12. I mean, there's some people live in Starkville, it takes them 20 and 30 minutes to get out of town. I just can't live that way. I want to have quick access to those highways. So maybe you do too. Make Portico your next move. All right, I want to talk about a couple things too. Being around your football coaches, being around your football players. There is a lot of enthusiasm about Mississippi State football within the program. I am excited about the season too. I don't know that maybe the casual fan of Mississippi State is very optimistic about the season. But being around the coaches and players these last couple of weeks at camps, my enthusiasm level has hit a new level. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I feel like I did in 14, when we're coming off, that crazy 13 season where, Dak had the great game in the Liberty Bowl, and we're thinking, we got our guy, here we go. I don't feel that way. But I do feel very confident that we're going to have a good year. We had a chance to win a handful of top 25 games last year. What did we win? 3? Could have won a couple more. Maybe we'd beat Arkansas. If we had a kicker, we'd probably beat Arkansas. Maybe beat LSU. And so I just say that, the negative folks, Steve, we almost lost to A&M. We almost lost to Louisiana Tech. We almost lost Auburn, and all that's true. And you're going to have some up and down with the younger roster. But now all of a sudden, our guys are juniors. Our core guys on offense. And let's be honest with ourselves. 2 years ago, our leading receiver, Jaden Wally, freshman. Our quarterback, Will Rogers, freshman. Kylan Hill opts out. Then all of a sudden, we have 2 freshman running backs carrying the mail. And so you got 5 freshmen that are playing a central role on your offense. That just shouldn't be. You shouldn't have guys like that out there just kind of running up down the field, making a contribution. I mean, it's Jaden Wally streaking down the sideline against the University of Georgia, outrunning their 4- and 5-star DBs. It's a 3-star converted quarterback from D'Iberville, Mississippi, who has cut his dreads, by the way. And I'm not real happy about it, to be honest with you, but it's what he wanted. So good for you, Jaden. But, now all of a sudden, we've got 2 years, and talking to some of the coaches, like, hey, we expected to have a good spring because we're a veteran team. We actually had a better spring than we anticipated. The guys, there was a lot of retention. We didn't have to spend the spring reteaching. We just had to kind of get our younger guys up to speed, and then all of a sudden you've got guys that have been an assistant for 2 years, so they make the coaching job easier because they're out there kind of assisting in the direction and the dissemination of that information. I think it's important for people to understand that. These are guys now that aren't thinking. We had a ton of thinking 2 years ago. And last year we didn't have as much. This year it's a lot more automatic. There's a lot more pitch and catch. And again, I think Will Rogers has hit a different level. Will had a great spring. Thought he had a good spring last year. Thought he had a good fall. Thought he had a great spring, though. And I was only out there a handful of times. And so, Paul Jones was there at every practice. And Paul's comments kind of mirror mine. It's like, we'll talk. And I was like, I saw this. And then I'll talk to some of the staff. And, coaches by nature may be a little bit optimistic publicly because they're trying to help you buy tickets, right? They're trying to encourage you to come buy tickets and be a season ticket holder. But what they say privately sometimes is a horse of a different color. There have been times I've talked to some of our coaches, man, we're going to be lucky to get to the ball game this year. We just don't have depth at this position. Quarterback play hasn't been very good. This year, there is just a little, I think it's because we've settled in a little bit and we kind of know who we are. We don't have as many pieces to fill. Talking to your wide receivers, they say the secondary is legit. They love the transfers. They love the newcomers. They think this is a defense that's going to be very, very good. And then, we all see Trevion Williams, who looks like the next Jeff Simmons. He's not as tall as Jeff, but this is a guy that's going to be able to play. This guy's going to be a difference maker. But how much will he play this year? And so I share that with you because, maybe there's perhaps some things that we don't know. It's like when I hear these guys say, hey, these guys are legit. Now, it's one thing when they do it at a microphone, behind the podium. It's another thing, especially when guys that I have covered since they were, 15, 16 years of age, I say, hey, just shoot it to me straight. How's this guy look? Oh, this guy's really good. This guy's really good. And there are other times they'll tell you, I don't know if he's going to be able to help us. Now, you don't go report that. You just kind of have it for your own knowledge. But the reality of it is that, the talk around the SEAL complex and the talk around the Bulldog practice fields is positive. Now, you'd expect, all hope spring eternal this time of year. But the reality of it is I'm just not finding a lot of people that are willing to say, you know what, hey, it's going to be a challenging year. Forget the schedule. That's part of the thing, too, that everybody's kind of leaning on. Well, how are we going to be better next year when we trade Vanderbilt for Georgia? Well, you have to beat somebody else. Not to mention the fact, too, it's like, should we have won that game at Georgia? I suspect we should have, right? I mean, we led the game throughout the game. We just kind of ran out of gas. We couldn't make a play in the secondary. If we'd had an SEC safety back there in that ball game, we probably win it by 2 touchdowns. I don't think your team is going to be intimidated by Georgia. Do I expect to win the game? No. But I don't want them to feel that way, and I don't think they do. I think they're ready to get into fall camp, and of course, like I always say, hey, I'm ready for football. Our coach is like, well, I'm ready to start practice. We got to get better. But I think we're going to be a better team than people realize. Now, again, I don't expect us to contend for Atlanta, but how many people expected us to go win at A&M last year mid-year? I mean, in the summertime, people were like, hey, this is a possibility. But the reality of it is we got a little bit closer to it. People are like, you know what? They're better than we are. And we beat them. We thought we had a chance to beat Auburn early on, and then you kind of saw them fading a little bit. But we're the ones that put them in a tailspin. The same thing for LSU. We played the best version of LSU all year. And the next thing you know, they're in a tailspin. And so, again, we weren't a great team last year. Did we take a step forward? Yes, we did. Will we take a step forward this year? I absolutely believe we will. I think it's going to be a good year. And I think that Mike Leach kind of likes the fact that we're just kind of flying under the radar a little bit. Nobody's talking about Mississippi State. I mean, maybe everybody's like, well, Will Rogers is going to throw for a ton of yards because of the air raid. And I don't think people fully appreciate how good this defense is going to be. I mean, you look at last year. I mean, you saw what it's like when you don't have Jaden Nelson. Excuse me, Jaden Crumedy. You don't have Big Baby in the middle. Nathan Pickering was kind of up and down a little bit last year, made some big plays for us, but now all of a sudden, those guys didn't play in the spring. JD, a guy that, a lot of quarterback hurries, didn't get a lot of quarterbacks on the ground, but that's how Montez Sweat was when he first got here too. Probably led the nation in quarterback hurries, and then only had a handful of sacks. We figured out how to plot a tighter course to the quarterback, became a first rounder. I'm not saying JD is in that direction, but every time I go to a football function on a Mississippi State campus, Jordan Davis is there. He's there. And sometimes he's not even working the camp. He's there to talk to his friends. He's there to talk to the other players. Trevion Williams is always out there. See John Lewis out there. These are guys that want to be around football. These are guys, too, to walk up and say, hey, Steve, tell me about those 2 new commitments. I'm impressed they knew. I mean, it's like, why would they keep up with recruiting this time of year? It's summertime, right? We're going through workouts, and then when we do get some time off, we're hanging out with friends, we're going to the pool and things like that. We're keeping up with recruiting? I mean, come on. That excites me. That tells me this guy is engaged in what's happening with his program. It's not just about what's happening now. This is guys that are invested in Mississippi State. So I share that with you because I think it's important to hear that. There's not this doom and gloom, nor would you expect there to be, around the SEAL complex. I think there are a lot of people that kind of feel like, hey, now we're ready to go. Does that mean we win 10 games? No, I'm not ready to go that far. But I do think that we're a team that's going to be competitive in every game. The Alabama game always worries me because, there's just a talent differential there. That's always kind of been the barometer for us too, kind of making sure that, hey, we can't beat them. We had them for a long time, but we always kind of say, hey, well, we kept it close. Defense played well. Should have had this, should have had that. But when I look at the rest of the schedule, I mean, as I mentioned, I think Alabama and Georgia right now you look at and say there's not anybody going to pick State to win those games. I mean, there may be some dyed-in-the-wool true Maroon Homer fan might. I think if we're objective and honest with ourselves, chances of us winning those games are not very good. But outside of that, how do you look at the schedule and say that's a certain loss? Hey, it's tough going down to play at LSU. It is. But you know what? The last time we went down there, we beat them. We arguably should have beat them last year. We had some really, really bad play in the secondary that cost us. And then, not to mention, have we forgotten the leaping penalty? We hold them. We finally get a stop. We got a chance to get back in the ball game. We give them a first down, and they gash us. We still only lost the game by 3 points. As bad as we played. And so, yeah, we got to get better quarterback play. We got to get better wide receiver play. We got to figure this left tackle situation out. Got to make sure our secondary is good. And we've got numbers. We've allocated a ton of scholarship spots for the secondary to get better. And to me, that's kind of the issue, too. What's the sign of a good coach? The sign of a good coach is you're adding to the top and you're subtracting at the bottom. And so you begin to think about, okay, if we had just had an average field goal kicker last year with just a little bit of mental toughness, we're winning 8 or 9 games. But we didn't. Now we do. And so Mike Leach recognized we had a deficiency there, and he went out and fixed it and go gets a Luke Gross, a finalist, to come be your kicker. We knew that we had some depth concerns in the secondary, so we'll go get Jackie Matthews, we'll go get Marcus Banks, and others, because we had a need. That's what good managers do. It's what good coaches do. We don't just say, well, we're going to coach them up. No, we're going to coach them up, but we're going to increase the level of competition. And it's a little different in football than it is maybe in basketball or baseball because the roster size is so much bigger, right? So you don't ever want anybody being comfortable. But the reality of it is it looks like, at least so far, that we've hit on transfers. That the guys that we have brought in are going to be guys that are capable of helping us. And then the guys that we're bringing back are improved and should be able to help us and with even greater regularity than they did last year. And so I'm sure we're going to have this conversation many times between now and Labor Day weekend. But I think it's important to kind of understand that we are seeing kind of the natural progression of the program again. And I don't know that a lot of our people fully appreciate kind of what happened that last year with Joe. And we've talked about it on the show, and I had people criticize me when I said we had a culture issue. Well, we absolutely did. And anybody that says otherwise just wasn't paying attention or didn't know any better. We had developed bad culture. And when Dan Mullen was here, we had great culture. We had great culture. We're kind of working back in that direction now, too. And that's the thing, too. These young men that we have are kind of bought into what their coaches are telling them. It's not like, well, I'm just here to play college football. I'm just here for myself. You know, they believe in each other. And I think that is probably the most important thing. as we kind of move forward, is that you have a team that believes in each other. They believe that they're capable of doing great things together. That's difficult to defeat. If you hadn't done so, let me encourage you to go to dogpilethebook.com and you can get personalized copies of all my sports books. That's Flim Flam, Alpha Dogs, Stark Villains, and Dogpile. And we just had the second printing of Dogpile show up. Less than 100 copies left of Stark Villains and Alpha Dogs. I would say probably more like 30 copies left of Stark Villains. And again, probably not going to be reprinted until 2024. I'm just giving you fair warning right now. Neither of those books. So if you don't have them, you need to get them. You need to go ahead and fill it. You say, well, Steve, I'm not ready to read it. Well, you know what? At some point soon, you may be ready to read it. You need to get it. Make sure you have it. If you're looking for Blooms of Oleander, you can find that at barnesandnoble.com, booksandbacon.com, Amazon. You can get it as an e-reader. How cool is that? It's the only book I have. It's available as an e-reader. It was just kind of a side project for me. It did really well. Very, very happy and proud of the work. It wasn't something that I put a lot of time and effort into. I mean, I put my heart into those pages, but I didn't require a lot of editing or interviews and things like that. I just wrote from my heart. The book did really well. If you're looking for Stark Villains gear, go to starkvillains.com. I wore a Stark Villains shirt yesterday, and I'm walking around, and like 3 or 4 people walked up and said, hey, man, I like your shirt. Well, you can get one, too, at starkvillains.com. Be sure and go check that out today. You'll be glad you did. All right, we're back on Monday, and I'll do my best to be on schedule. I hate going this legs, and a lot of you guys like to listen to me on the ride home, but we had football camp today, and we only have a handful of those, and so I want to be sure that we get out there, we get quality pictures, and make sure we're talking to the right guys, and Paul and Robbie both turned out there today, and it'll just be me and Paul tomorrow, Saturday, for the 707, but, it's not a very common occurrence that we get all of these guys on campus that Mississippi State is highly recruiting and have a chance to get pictures and have a chance to evaluate them and have a chance to see how they play and be able to kind of articulate that with you guys. Your coaching staff can't do it. They can't talk about recruits, but we can. And so we don't miss the opportunity to be out there, whether it be baseball camps, basketball camps, or football camps, to see the future Bulldogs in action so we can kind of get you prepared for what's coming in the years to come. That's it for today, man. We'll see you guys on Monday. You guys have a great weekend. Until next time, let's all live our lives in a way we make more friends than enemies, and people can see a difference in the way we live.
Cedar Point's Frontier Festival is back and brimming with new flavor. From May 26th through June 19th, this Old West-inspired street fest will fill Cedar Point with live bands, nightly hoedowns, and a hubbub of family activities. Yep, you'll find wheelbarrows packed with sunflowers and characters straight out of the frontier, but you'll also discover 25 cherry-inspired dishes and over 65 cocktails, seltzers, and beers. Get all the fixins, plus savings to boot with a Frontier Festival bundle, which includes admission, parking, and a tasting card. Only at cedarpoint.com.
Switching and saving with Geico is easy, so you're free to ponder life's big questions. Like, if a person can get discombobulated, does that mean the rest of the time they're just like combobulated? Are we humans always in a state of combobulation? Until, of course, something dramatic happens and we are discombobulated for a while. Then we go back to being combobulated. Yeah, that's probably how that works. Switch and save with Geico. It's easier than you think.